I'd like to begin this morning's press conference by first of all welcoming Deputies Bernard Durkin and Deputy Matty McGrath and thank them for the Trojan work that they have done in recent years in, I suppose, advocating for birth mothers and their children and really fighting for justice for them. My name is Anna Kavanagh and I am the co-founder and the convener to the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice, and I'm joined here this morning by our Secretary, Dr. Finbar Markey, and by our lead researcher, Michelle Monaghan. And just very briefly, the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice was set up on the 15th of June 2019, so we'll be celebrating 5 years on Saturday. And since then, we have grown into becoming the largest non-TUSLA funded, non-state funded advocacy group for birth mothers and their children in difficulties with TUSLA, the family courts and the Gardaí. And in fact, we receive no funding whatsoever. All of the work that we do on a voluntary basis. And later on today, we are appearing before the Oireachtas Petitions Committee and the Ombudsman. We submitted a petition 2 years ago requesting that legislation be introduced to give HICRA's powers to sanction TUSLA when it's found to be non-compliant. And we'll be telling the committee this afternoon that it's out there, hiding in plain sight, that TUSLA is very dysfunctional. And we'll be presenting the committee with some of the media headlines just since January, showing that children have gone missing out of care. In fact, 22 children that went missing in January out of state care have never been accounted for. The UCD report last year documented how children are going missing from state care, feared trafficked into the sex industry. And Deputy Peadar Tobin highlighted in the Dáil in February how one child that went missing out of state care was missing for 14 months and was found then locked up in a brothel. And of course, Jack Power has done amazing work in documenting in the Irish Times the placement of children in unregulated residential homes, and in fact one or more of these residential homes are now subject of Garda investigation. It's alleged that the head of one of these residential homes fabricated a curriculum vitae for the staff and falsified Garda vetting documents. And you know, we read about this in the headlines, but behind these headlines are the mothers and children who are suffering. And these mothers don't have a voice because of the in-camera rule in the family law court. They are the one maligned group of mothers in society that have no voice. No matter what injustice is done to you, you know, you have the freedom to be able to come out in public and to say what is happening to you. But with these mothers behind these headlines and their children, they have no voice. So we are their voice. And in an attempt to give them a voice, last year I interviewed 20 of these mothers in depth, and I also got 20 ladies to do the voiceovers. And I produced and presented a series of 20 podcasts documenting what is happening to these mothers. And we hear, you know, there's 6,000 children approximately in state care at the minute. But we never stop to pause. How do these children, how were they taken into state care? And when I interviewed these mothers, they described in graphic detail how their children were taken. In some cases, the children were actually taken from the school. One mother described how she went down to the school at 3 o'clock to pick up her children to find a number of Garda squad cars in the school car park, and her children were actually screaming and bawling, and they were bundled into Garda cars and taken away in full view of all of our neighbours, in full view of all of the children's friends. In another case, a grandmother documented how it was a lovely day and the children were out playing in the garden and the social workers arrived to take the children. And she described how the children screamed and bawled and roared not to be taken away. And their friends were in the garden playing with them. And all of this happened in full view. But to me, the most appalling thing of all is the removal of newborn babies at birth. And 3 mothers for the podcast series described in detail how their children were taken. One of them actually managed to hold on to her baby, but she was put through hell by Tusla. Her family were forced to pay for round-the-clock qualified nurse to be in the house at all times. It cost the family a fortune, but they did it. She managed to hold on to her baby. But in the other cases, the babies were taken at birth. One mother described how she was breastfeeding her baby and she was notified the day after the birth that she was to present in the family court the following day. And she'd walk a mile down to the courthouse, and she had to hang around the courthouse all day until all the criminal cases were heard. And she was lactating, and a care order was granted to Tusla to take her baby, and she was instructed to have her baby ready to be handed over to the social workers at 2 o'clock the following day. She went back up to the hospital and she was breastfeeding her baby. She wasn't allowed to have a curtain pulled around her, and she described in detail how the following day she bathed her little baby, newborn baby, and put it into his carry tot, and a security man came up on the ward and accompanied her down to the back door of the hospital, and her baby was driven away by 2 social workers. And she was immediately discharged from the hospital and sent home, absolutely no supports whatsoever. So the handover, oh, it is just appalling. And then once the children are handed over, mothers then face huge difficulties in having access to their children. And if they make any kind of complaint, the children tell them during access that they are being abused in the foster home, and the mothers report this. Their access is completely, totally and utterly blocked, and they never get to see their children again. And as regards reunification, we have only come across 1 case of a reunification in the 5 years that we've been in existence. And indeed, Deputy Kathleen Funchion, who's the chair of the Children's Committee, said that when Bernard Gloucester, the former head of Tusla, appeared before the Children's Committee, Deputy Funchion told him that she, since she was first elected as a public official, never saw a reunification. So, you know, I just want to keep this very brief. I have a lot more that I would like to say, but I'll possibly come back to it, and so I will hand over next to Deputy Bernard Durkin.
Thank you. First of all, I might say thank you, here and Matty and others outside of this room who have carried on this struggle in the face of what seemed impossible odds for several years, and I think you're to be congratulated. We are achieving results. It has been slow, it's been tedious, it's been difficult, and it has had many obstacles put in your path. So you're to be congratulated for the work that you've done and helping the rest of us out in the work that we do. In relation to the very important point that you just raised there is in relation to the in-camera rules. The problem is, and has been for some time, that the in-camera rule not only applies to the courts, but applies to matters that have happened within the courts as well. And when you apply that in-camera rule across the board, it means total silence, because you cannot gain and you cannot quote what happened in the courts because of the in-camera rule as well. So we found that particularly difficult, and we had to find various ways and means around it, and go on the outer edge, as it were, to bring attention to the fact that some mothers have not had the right to see their children for several years, some not at all, some basically only by way of the telephone call, and the central issue behind all this is that it is attack on the maternal instinct. The maternal instinct is the strongest instinct that nature knows. That's the fact of life in the human world, the animal world, and so on and so forth. That maternal instinct, and it tears at the heartstrings of the mother in every case when the mother is subjected to and the child is subjected to this enforced separation. It's appalling, and the things that you've just described. We dealt with this in the lead up to what's known now as the abortion amendment to the Constitution as well. And the same theme appeared, where the removal of the child from the precinct of the mother with no possible opportunity of crossing that boundary unless with the approval of the court, which the court won't give. So there's much more work to be done. We have achieved results in the past few weeks, and the Minister has indicated what's likely to happen next. We have to continue to advocate for a strict adherence to the points she referred to, Section 32 reports, Section 40 reports, and so on and so forth. And in particular, the right of the parent, be it mother or father in some cases, but the majority of cases relates to the mother, to cross-question in the courts. And how strict that has been operated so far, an indication is that, like, we've raised it in the House on numerous occasions, and you can't even use the word court. Can't even use the word, because there are people waiting, watching for an opportunity to see senior counsel to be called in and to find out, we have a breach here, we can work on this. We have been challenged several times, and we will be challenged, but the important thing to remember is this: an injustice has been done and continues to be done right up to now. There's now the distinct possibility that we're going to win due process and natural justice, which are basic fundamentals of the legal system and the Constitution in this country. So I think we're going fine at the moment. It was a tough struggle. All due credit to yourselves for staying with it, and to the women who made contact with us up and down the country, and a couple of men as well, incidentally, because it is very simple to say, well, okay, we have a Section 32 or Section 40 report here, and the judge says, yeah, we have that, that's the rule, we apply that. Can I question it? No. And in some cases where the mother said, can I want to contest that. Yes, do I have a right to contest it? You do, but you're not going to get it. So this, that flies in the face of two basic principles: due process and natural justice. So if the person doesn't get due process, they're not going to get natural justice either. So, what I want to avoid being lured into the area of saying something that will give some well-paid lawyer an opportunity to sit down and say, we'll do them on this. We'll find a half sentence here, we'll imply. Because the questions come in and we can't answer those questions, because it becomes part and parcel of the body of evidence that they want to pursue for themselves. And the last point I want to make is that we couldn't do anything without your help and support and information. And also the information and the help and support of a couple of journalists like Kitty Hahn and a few other journalists. And more recently in some of the tabloids who were very helpful and willing to take a chance and push out the boat and so on. Without that, we wouldn't have achieved anything, because the mills of God, they say, grind slow. The mills of justice grind exceeding small as well in this country. But you have the right to feel considerable satisfaction at achieving what you did so far. We will continue to do our job. We'll be watching the nuances of what's coming up. We hope that it satisfies the need and meets the challenges, and that children and parents are not going to be subjected to the kind of offhand treatment that they have received heretofore through family law.
Thank you so much, Deputy Durkin. And I'd like at this point to welcome Deputy Paul Murphy, and thank you so much for coming. And you have raised very important issues around justice for mothers and their children recently. And
I'm here to support. And
you're here.
Yeah.
You're here to support.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Okay. I know that both Bernard and Matty have to leave shortly for business meetings across the road in Leinster House. So, Matty, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good Anna, and welcome, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you and Finbar and the mothers, indeed Deputy Durkin, for his massive engagement, and thank you for being here. And the few other media outlets that have given some, some bit of exposure to what's going on. It's a toxic situation, and I meet people all the time from all over the country who ring me desperate, and men, as Brendan said as well. And this in camera rule and all that, it's just a murky situation. And it's so desperate for children to be in this situation and to be able to be, like those incidents you quoted with the schoolyard incident, and that'll never be forgotten by the colleagues and friends and classmates either, so it's horrific. So we need to work together, maybe Deputy Murphy and Brendan, myself and a few of us, to see Pam Tobin and John McGinnis and a few others that have raised it, and very few. And in fairness, the Count Cola has given you some latitude, Bernard. Look, it's horrific. I knocked on a door, and there's one anecdote I'll just tell you. About 3 weeks ago, tomorrow, and I met this guy. I recognised he worked in a care home, and I just asked him how things are. I said, we have only one inmate now, and this would be teenage, from about 12 upwards. All right, and how many staff? He said, over 22. And I said, but there's 3 out of 6, so he said, we have 17 at the moment, 4 out of 6. And how things are, our inmate is missing for 3 weeks. We've no inmate, and there's a bench warrant there for his arrest, and he's been in court 3 times, and he walked out of the courts again. And these people are being paid the cost. I mean, nothing can be compared to the physical and mental torture and the injustice, but the costs are also associated with these places. And then the private sector has got in there as well and given care. This is a public facility, but the private companies have got in there, and they're in it for money, not for adopted children. I think the 22 children could go missing from in January, and that exposure done by the UCC was excellent. But look, we're going to have to, pressure is building up, and the lid is going to have to be taken off of this, and I promise to do anything I can to support you, and I wish you well in the Political Committee. Don't have too much hope for it, because I've seen other issues before the Political Committee, but best of luck and the Ombudsman. So look, I'm here to support you, and thank you for your continued work and efforts.
Thank you so much, Matty. And what I would say to you, Deputy Murphy and Bernard and Matty, that we're going to have a general election, perhaps in the autumn, perhaps next spring, and what we in the Alliance of Birthmothers Campaigning for Justice will be calling for is for individual TDs and for political parties and for independent groupings to actually state categorically in their election manifestos that they want reform of TUSLA, and whatever groupings are going to be sitting down then after the election to form the next government, we will know how committed TDs are to reform of TUSLA if they put that down as a red line issue for the next programme of government. So I'll now hand you over to Dr. Finbar Markey, who is our Secretary.
Hi guys, I think a lot has already been said, but also a lot has not been said. Just to make the point about what Matty said about the privatisation of care for children in this country. I worked in services for a private company for over 10 years in residential care for adolescents, and I had serious problems with my conscience, and that's why I don't work in it anymore. And what I found was that professionals who may have been working in services for years, when they join a private company, they cannot open their mouth when they see abuse. And the reason is their paymasters are TUSLA. That private company depends on contracts and checks that are coming from the same social work teams that they should be criticising. So that's a key issue when it comes to actual performance by TUSLA and the involvement of privatisation. With regards to the matters at hand, it isn't just the in-camera rule, but that is a core issue. The pathological behaviour of senior members of TUSLA in the fabrication of files, the fabrication of lies, the destruction of people's private and personal personas within their own communities, to the point where they drive people to suicide. This isn't mentioned, and this cannot be measured by the way HICWA measures the performance of TUSLA at the moment. At the moment, it's a desktop exercise that gathers some quantitative data, numbers and statistics, but does not look into the lived experiences of people that access services, both mothers and their children. I worked for over 12 years with adolescents in the care system. Not once did I come across a case where there was an attempt to reunite a family. Quite the opposite. The family became the problem. Eyes go in the air when their mother has access. Eyes go in the air because you have to pick the mother up. Every effort is made to avoid contact between the mother and the child. And that is standard, and it's a breach of our law, and it's a breach of our conscience as people, as Irish people that have families ourselves, that have feelings, that can empathise ourselves. It's a breach of all of that. So TUSLA, from my point of view, so my PhD looks at organisational culture. Thank you, Paul. TUSLA needs to be not just reformed, it needs to be pulled apart and rebuilt based on the espoused values that you see in the paperwork, but you don't see in the practice. And so I think by getting HICWA to be able to properly sanction TUSLA, not to tap them and say, sorry, we'll give you a new plan, and if you don't meet that plan in a year, we'll give you another new plan. There are individuals in these organisations that are fabricating information about mothers and children, that are driving people to suicide. Those people have to be sanctioned in some way, and currently there's no system there to do that.
So I'd like to introduce you now to Michelle Monaghan, who is our lead researcher.
So just briefly, in relation to today, we are attending the Petitions Committee to look for sanctions where TUSLA can be sanctioned in law. And Section 69 of the 1991 Childcare Act gives powers to the Minister to investigate TUSLA, which is what HICWA's role is. But the investigation stops there and they give recommendations, and there is nothing then afterwards in law to sanction. So that's what we will go to the committee today to look for. Last May 2023, I spoke about what mothers wanted and the changes in legislation to hold TUSLA accountable when they don't work in the best interest of children. And so today we'll bring that into our opening statements in the committee as well. It's important just to note as well today in this press conference that TUSLA is registered as a separate legal entity with the company's registration office as a body corporate. And TUSLA is a €1 billion business funded by the government. And it appears to have a promotional function where in law, in Section 8 of the 2014 Child and Family Agency Act, it is to support and promote protection, not protect. So it has a business plan, and the business plan is updated every year, and it is registered with the CRO, and its funding is from government. So I suppose coming from our petition today as well, yes, we do want them to be sanctioned when they don't work in the best interest of children, but also to our legislators, what was TUSLA set up for, and what is its function? Is it a protection agency? It doesn't appear so in the written law, and if it's not a protection agency, what is it? And that is I suppose our goals today is to look for legislative change in Section 69 of the 1991 Childcare Act, and to look at the functions in law of TUSLA, because we are falling short of having a child protection agency actually.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And I'll just finish up by saying that TUSLA is able to fall between many cracks because there's no single body that it is accountable to. So it's accountable to Minister Roderick O'Gorman, yet in Dublin Castle on the 7th of February at the 10th anniversary celebration of TUSLA, Minister Roderick O'Gorman was reported in the Irish Times as having said that TUSLA never gave him or the government one moment of concern. Now, we find that very concerning, because already at that time we had the UCD report on the children being trafficked into the sex trade, and we had 4 reports sent to him by Mr. Justice Sims detailing his concerns about the welfare of children taken into residential care. Then we have Minister Helen McEntee, and of course we have the separations of powers in state, but at the same time Deputy Durkin has on more than 30 occasions since September 2022 called for a lifting of the in-camera rule. Hardly a week goes by but he raises it in the Dáil. So the wheels of justice are just grinding ever so slowly. And while that is happening, we have the mothers and children that I've spoken about already suffering horrifically at the hands of the state. Then you have Coro, who's responsible for registering social workers, and when our mothers complain to Coro about the social workers and how they've perjured themselves in the court, Coro say they can't do anything about that because of the in-camera rule in the family court. And also Primetime, RTE Primetime, Barry O'Kelly did an excellent programme in 2023 about the fact that anybody can be a psychologist in Ireland. All you need to do is put a brass plate on the door. Coro is supposed to be the body that registers psychologists, but it has never actually got around to doing that. And what we have then are these experts, so-called experts in the family courts, making all sorts of claims in their reports and advising judges, and they have absolutely no qualifications. Then we have the Children's Ombudsman, and TUSLA has a complaint system called Tell Us, and in fact one of the podcasts that I did is about the Tell Us complaint system. So the mother has to complain online through the Tell Us system, and what happens then is the complaint goes straight back to the social worker that the mother complained about. It goes on and on for years with no resolution whatsoever, and while this is happening, the Children's Ombudsman cannot accept complaints about TUSLA until their complaint system is exhausted. And because TUSLA bring the mothers on a merry-go-round, they never actually arrive at a point where they're in a position to complain to the Children's Ombudsman. Then we have HICWA, and I won't elaborate on that because I think Finbar did that very well. And finally we have the courts. And Ellen Coyne did a report in the Irish Independent earlier this week. Currently, TUSLA is in breach of 6 High Court orders. Now, if I'm in breach of a High Court order, I'm deemed to be in contempt of court. And if I don't purge my contempt of court, then I will be jailed, as happened in the case of Enoch Burke. That's a very famous case. But TUSLA is allowed to be in contempt of court in relation to there were 6 High Court orders to provide specialist care for 6 troubled teens, and they have failed to do so. And an attempt by one of the mothers to have Tusla held in contempt of court was actually rejected by Judge Jordan, who had made one of the original High Court orders to provide care for her son. So, you know, there has to be just a single body set up to which Tusla is ultimately held to account. And also, I might add about CORU, the registration body for social workers. We're all familiar with the Morris McCabe case of the copy and paste errors made by the social workers, and that was in 2017. It took until December 2023 for CORU to carry out an investigation. That's 6 years later. But that investigation was held in private. So there seems to be no accountability and no transparency. And again, I have to come back finally to the point. We're talking here about mothers and children who are being abused by the state. There's an unbroken chain of state abuse of mothers and children stretching back through the decades. And we can forgive past generations because the public generally didn't know what was happening. But this generation is never going to be forgiven for our failure to give justice for mothers and children, because we know about it. It's hiding in plain sight. So it's the hope and prayer and deepest wishes of the mothers that we represent, whose voices we are today, that justice for them is going to come very soon. And thank you so much.
And can I just add to that, Anna? As somebody who was in an orphanage for 4 years myself, in my first 4 years, the impact that it has on your personality development, and I expect right until you're dying as an old man, if you're lucky, it still has an impact on how you carry yourself in the world, how you feel about yourself in the world. You carry a rejection complex through your life, lots of different things and lots of unanswered questions for an entire lifetime that shapes your personality. So it's not just about what the public think and how the public feel, it's about those hundreds if not thousands of individuals who are having their life directed in a way that's unnecessary, that are full of obstacles and traumas and upsets and self-doubt and all of those things. That's unnecessary. If people can just tap into their own humanity and say, rather than look for an administrative solution to this that protects us, let's look for a humane solution that keeps families together. And that's what's not there at the moment.